So your baseboards are done, they're sanded, they're caulked, they're spackled, feeling pretty smooth. What's the next step? In our last video, we did the headboard and I showed you guys how to caulk it and spackle it. So the next step here is going to be priming it before you paint it. Always prime it. And I'm going to show you guys all the materials you'll need first. Here is everything you'll need to start priming your baseboards. We're going to start with a 2.5-inch brush for priming. You're going to want to get nice cut lines along the base and on the top. It just saves the hassle later of having to deal with bleeding or anything like that in painting, and I'll go over that later too. In this particular case, our walls, it's just drywall, so they're not primed yet. So I'm not going to be taping the tops or anything, but if you've just replaced your baseboards, you'll probably want to do that, and I'll show you guys. Next, you'll want masking paper and a masker. This is great. This is foot-long paper. We're going to do the bottom so that we don't get any primer on the new floors. Next, you'll want a 4-inch roller handle with a 4-inch on it. I already have a primer roller attached to it. You can get 3/4-inch nap primer roller, or just rollers. Next, you'll want your tape. I included purple tape here just in case some of your guys' projects are just the baseboards and your walls and floors are done already. Purple tape is great for protecting the wall later so that you can do touch-ups on it if you already have the paint. Or if you have very sensitive floors, this is going to be great. Purple tape, Scotch. But usually, blue is going to be just fine. It's slightly cheaper, but if you want to go the long way and make it sure it's done right, you can't go wrong with purple. You're going to want a wet rag, a roller screen. These are great for applying, spreading paint around into the roller so that you get even coating. And then you're going to want a 2-gallon cut bucket. This one's seen better days. And that's everything you'll need. I'll show you the step-by-step process on doing your baseboards. So one of the first steps, and honestly most important steps for prepping these baseboards for priming, is taping the bases. Reason being is that you really don't want to get any paint on your new floors. Most of the time the floors are going to be in already. If they're not, don't worry about it. But I'm going to show you guys how to properly tape these baseboards. You're going to want to get really close in and see if you can shimmy it basically under the small gap that is at the base. And then you want to put a lot of pressure down. Make sure that that tape is secured onto that floor. And then you continue on doing this next section here. Applying some pressure. Round off this corner here. Essentially, you go around and do that to all your baseboards. But for this example, I'm just going to stick to this section here. Some baseboards have this molding, right? Not all of them, but some do. And in this case, we've got to make sure that we get every detail covered so we don't risk getting paint on the floor. So, now that I've pressed that in, right, should look something like that. There's no floor showing under that baseboard. So we've properly covered that floor. So that's the first step. The next thing you guys need to know about priming, especially when you're rolling these baseboards, paint flicks off of that roller and it gets everywhere. So what you want to do is grab that foot-long paper. Sorry about that sound, it's terribly loud. And attach it to that tape. Just like that. So now you're covering like a foot out from that space too. So that's really important because when you're rolling, sometimes paint will flick out, and so it's good to cover that. And if you really want to make sure your entire floor is covered, using ram board like we have here, which we'll do later, but for this example, I'm showing you what's really important. But you can cover your entire floors with that ram board. So your floor's protected, it's time to prime. So you've got your primer in your bucket. There's some primer on your brush. You've spread some primer onto your 4-inch roller. And what I like to do first is grab my 2.5-inch brush. And make sure I cut these sides here. So I apply the primer because you're kind of gonna have some heavy primer on there. I'm gonna cut this because we're just working with this section today. But what I want to cut is this molding first. Reason I'm doing it with the brush is because if you use a roller, you shove a lot of paint into these cracks. And the reason I'm cutting this molding is because I want to get the least amount of paint shoved into the underside. Because what happens is when you take your tape off and you're done painting and everything, sometimes there's what we call bleeding from under the molding or the baseboard. It's when paint gets under the tape and then seeps under it like that. And what will happen is that you get paint that kind of bleeds out onto your new floor, and you don't want that. So I'm cutting the molding. Just like that. And once that molding's cut, I grab my 4-inch roller. And sometimes, as you can see, I'm gonna set it here. There's stuff in the primer. You can just take it out with your finger. You have a wet rag to clean your finger. And so we're just gonna roll. Roll that primer out. Next we have this edge to do. So we'll just grab the end of the roller like that and just roll it along that edge. And finally, that piece again right there, we don't want that. We grab our brush again. We do the top edge. So, we've brushed that top edge just like that. I'm gonna take our roller one more time. We want to roll out those brush strokes. A bit of paint on our roller. That is your primed baseboard right there. It almost looks like it's gotten a paint coat, but that's how you do it. So you're done priming the baseboard. The next step is painting. I'd let the primer cure for about a half hour to an hour, depending on how hot your house is. But yeah, that's the next step. And it already looks like it's painted, white at least. Thanks for joining me, and I've got tons of content coming up, so let me know in the comments if there's anything you want to see.